Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Cain Ashby had always been a man of complex emotions, a man whose heart carried the weight of past mistakes, lingering regrets, and an unspoken devotion that he rarely let anyone see, not even Lily Winters, the woman who had captured his heart so completely years ago yet had slipped through his fingers more times than he cared to count. And now, in the latest twist of fate that could only come out of Genoa City, Cain found himself standing before Lily in a quiet corner of crimson lights, away from the usual chaos of the city, away from the ever-watchful eyes of family, friends, and enemies alike, with a nervous energy that was uncharacteristic for the suave, confident man who had faced corporate battles, personal betrayals, and the kind of heartbreak that could shatter even the strongest of men, because this time, Cain was vulnerable in a way he hadn't been in years. Vulnerable to the possibility of rejection, vulnerable to the hope that Lily might see in his eyes the sincerity of a love that had never wavered despite the trials that had tested them both. And as he reached into his pocket and felt the small, cool metal of the engagement ring he had painstakingly chosen, a ring that represented not just commitment but redemption, a chance to rewrite their shared history, a chance to heal the wounds that had festered in silence, he could feel his heartbeat quicken, a symphony of anticipation and anxiety, because he knew that a proposal was more than just an exchange of vows or a public declaration. It was a gamble, a leap of faith that might either reunite them in a way that felt predestined or fracture them forever, leaving scars that might never fully fade. Yet as Lily looked up at him, her eyes wide with surprise, a mixture of disbelief, caution, and the faintest glimmer of curiosity, Cain could feel the years of tension between them crystallizing into a singular moment where the past, present, and future collided, where every unspoken apology, every moment of longing, every misunderstanding, and every choice that had led them to this very second was suspended in the air like a fragile breath. And in that suspended reality Cain spoke, his voice trembling just slightly despite the careful control he had always prided himself on, telling Lily that he knew they had both made mistakes, that circumstances, pride, and fear had kept them apart, but that despite it all, his love for her had never diminished, had never faltered, had never stopped being the guiding force in his life, a constant North Star he could always rely on even when the storms of deception, betrayal, and miscommunication had threatened to drown them both in separate orbits. And as he knelt, presenting the ring with a quiet elegance that contrasted the chaos of his emotions, he asked Lily to marry him, not just as a gesture of romantic desire but as a declaration of commitment, a promise to face the challenges of the world together, to be a united front against whatever obstacles might arise, whether from business rivalries, familial expectations, or the unpredictable schemes of Genoa City's ever-present schemers. And in that instant Lily's mind raced through the years they had shared, the passion, the heartbreak, the moments of joy and sorrow intertwined so tightly that separating them seemed impossible. And she remembered the nights when Cain had held her close, when words were unnecessary because their hearts had communicated everything silently, when he had been her protector, her confidant, her partner in every sense of the word. And yet she also remembered the betrayals, the times she had felt abandoned, the moments when his secrets had created chasms between them that she feared might never be bridged. And now, looking at him, seeing the vulnerability etched into his features, seeing the hope that trembled just beneath the surface of his carefully maintained composure, she felt a flicker of something she had tried to suppress for too long, a flicker that told her perhaps the love they had was stronger than the mistakes, that the bond they shared could withstand even the most challenging of tests if only they allowed themselves to embrace it fully. And Cain, sensing her hesitation but also the warmth returning to her gaze, continued, explaining that this proposal was not impulsive, that it was not merely a romantic gesture designed to capture a fleeting moment of passion, but a deliberate, conscious decision to invest in their shared future, to acknowledge the depth of his feelings, to honor the journey they had taken together with honesty and openness, to offer a foundation of trust where there had been doubt, and to create a life that was not dictated by past regrets but by the possibilities of love, commitment, and mutual respect. And as Lily's lips parted slightly, as if to respond but without words, Cain could feel the tension in the room shift, a subtle acknowledgement that the emotional walls she had built around her heart were beginning to crumble, that the years of separation and pain might finally give way to the kind of connection that had always been meant to be. And in that charged silence, every memory of shared laughter, Every whispered secret, every tear shed in moments of vulnerability seemed to converge, forming an unspoken narrative of two souls who had been pulled apart by circumstance but never by choice. And Cain, knowing that the power of this moment could not be underestimated, added that their love had always been their greatest strength, that it had guided them through trials, that it had endured challenges that would have broken others, and that it deserved a second chance, a chance to flourish not just in the shadow of past mistakes, but in the light of shared dreams and aspirations. And as Lily's hand instinctively reached for his, as if seeking reassurance and connection simultaneously, Cain felt an almost spiritual sense of destiny, as if the universe had conspired to bring them to this precise moment, to allow them to reconcile, to rebuild, to reignite a flame that had never truly been extinguished. And he spoke of the children, of family, of a home filled with love and laughter, of nights spent in each other's arms, not out of obligation but out of desire, a life that embraced both joy and hardship with the knowledge that they would face it together, unflinching and united. And as Lily's eyes welled with tears, a mixture of emotion that reflected relief, hope, love, and even lingering doubt, Cain felt a surge of emotion that was almost overwhelming, the culmination of years of longing, heartbreak, and anticipation. And he gently brushed a strand of hair from her face, feeling the softness of her skin, the warmth of her gaze, and the magnetic pull that had always existed between them, a pull that defied logic, that defied circumstance, that defied every obstacle Genoa City had ever placed in their path. And in that instant, with hearts beating in synchrony, Cain realized that this proposal was more than just a question. It was a rebirth, a chance to rewrite their story not as individuals haunted by past regrets, but as partners committed to navigating the future together. And as Lily finally found her voice, a voice that quivered yet carried the strength of her convictions, she whispered a tentative yes. A word so simple yet so laden with significance, a word that promised forgiveness, renewal, and the possibility that love, true love, could conquer even the most daunting of obstacles. And as Cain slid the ring onto her finger, he felt the weight of the moment settle like a gentle embrace around them both, a moment that would mark not just an engagement but the restoration of a bond that had endured trials, that had survived deception, misunderstanding, and the inevitable chaos of life in Genoa City. And as they embraced, holding each other tightly, the world around them seemed to pause, as if granting them this reprieve from drama, from rivalry, from the endless scheming that had so often defined their lives. And in that embrace, Cain and Lily found a profound sense of peace, a recognition that while the path ahead would not be without challenges, they now faced it together, strengthened by the knowledge that love had guided them back to one another, that hope had not abandoned them, and that the proposal, unexpected though it had been, had the potential to heal wounds, to bridge gaps, and to remind them both why, despite everything, they had never truly stopped loving each other. And as they pulled back slightly to look into each other's eyes, smiles breaking through tears, there was a mutual understanding, a silent agreement that whatever the future held, they would confront it side by side, resilient, unwavering, and deeply, irrevocably in love. And this moment, charged with emotion, layered with history, and ripe with possibility, would not be the end but rather the beginning of a renewed journey, one where trust could be rebuilt, where passion could be rekindled, and where Cain and Lily could finally, fully, and without hesitation, embrace the life they were always meant to share. Because in Genoa City, amid betrayal, heartbreak, and endless twists of fate, sometimes the simplest act of courage, asking someone to marry you, can change everything, can rewrite the story, and can bring two hearts back together when all seems lost. And as they lingered in that embrace, feeling the solidity of each other's presence, the echo of past mistakes faded just slightly, replaced by a shimmering hope that, perhaps at last, love would triumph over everything. And the streets of Genoa City, with all its scheming, chaos, and drama, felt momentarily less heavy, less ominous, because in that quiet corner of crimson lights, Cain and Lily had found something timeless, something pure, and something that, if nurtured, could last a lifetime. As the echo of Lily's tentative yes lingered in the air, Cain's heart swelled with a mixture of relief, joy, and an almost overwhelming sense of destiny, as if every misstep, every heartbreak, and every moment of uncertainty in their shared past had led to this single electrifying moment. And yet the reality of Genoa City was never so simple, never so forgiving, because even as they clung to each other in the quiet corner of crimson lights, the undercurrent of tension that had always surrounded their lives began to seep back in, subtle at first, like a distant murmur of impending storms. As Kane's mind raced through the immediate challenges that lay ahead, how would Lily's family react? How would the Newman and Abbott machinations intersect with their personal happiness? How would their friends, who had been witnesses to so many ups and downs, respond to the news that two people who had once seemed irreparably torn apart were now planning to unite their lives forever? And Kane knew that while the proposal marked a triumphant step forward, it was only the beginning of a more complex, intricate dance that would require patience, strategy, and above all, unwavering honesty, because Genoa City thrived on secrets, on betrayal, on whispers behind closed doors, and if they were to survive and thrive, Kane and Lily would have to navigate a labyrinth of jealousy, envy, and the inevitable skepticism of those who had seen their relationship tested, broken, and rebuilt more times than anyone could count. And Lily, despite the rush of emotion and the warmth that flooded her chest as she gazed at Kane, felt a simultaneous tightening in her stomach, a swirl of doubt that reminded her of all the pain they had endured, the nights spent apart, the arguments fueled by pride and miscommunication, the moments when she had questioned not only Kane's motives but also her own heart, wondering whether it was possible to forgive fully, to trust without reservation, to leap into the unknown once again, knowing that the stakes were higher now, that their lives were intertwined not just emotionally but socially, professionally, and publicly, and she realized that saying yes was only the first step. The real challenge lay ahead, in convincing herself, Kane, and everyone around them that this time, their love could withstand the pressures of life in Genoa City, a city where even a whisper of scandal could unravel years of careful effort and reputation, where alliances shifted like sand, where loyalties were constantly tested, and where one misstep could have cascading consequences that rippled through families, corporations, and friendships alike. And as they left Crimson Lights, walking hand in hand through the streets that had witnessed countless dramas, confrontations, and revelations, Kane felt the familiar thrill of both excitement and dread, knowing that every step forward would be observed, analyzed, and potentially undermined by those who had a vested interest in keeping them apart, from scheming business rivals to overprotective family members, from ex-lovers nursing grudges to friends who had quietly bet against their union for years, and he realized that the simplicity of love, the idea of two people committing their hearts to one another, was a luxury that Genoa City seldom afforded, that every act of romance was intertwined with strategy, every display of vulnerability a potential weapon for manipulation, and yet despite all this, he could not suppress the joy, the profound sense that after years of trials and separations, he and Lily were finally seizing control of their story, reclaiming the narrative that had been repeatedly disrupted by external forces, and he was determined to protect it with everything he had, knowing that the challenges ahead would test not just their love but their resilience, their patience, and their ability to forgive not only each other but also the circumstances that had conspired to keep them apart. And as they returned to Lily's apartment, the space filled with memories both sweet and bittersweet, she felt a torrent of conflicting emotions, elation at the prospect of marriage, trepidation at the responsibilities it entailed, nostalgia for the moments of innocence and spontaneity that had characterized their early relationship, and a creeping awareness that family reactions could either solidify this newfound hope or threaten to destabilize it entirely. And soon enough, the knock on the door heralded the arrival of her brother, Devon, whose protective instincts flared immediately as he noticed Kane's presence, a mixture of concern, skepticism, and the desire to shield his sister from potential heartbreak. And as Devon entered, his gaze shifting between Kane and Lily, the unspoken tension in the room became palpable, as though the walls themselves were holding their collective breath, waiting to see how this confrontation would unfold. And Kane, ever the diplomat, yet aware of the delicate emotional landscape, spoke with a measured warmth, acknowledging Devon's concerns, assuring him that his intentions were genuine, that he had learned from past mistakes, that he was fully committed to Lily and their shared future. And he could see the internal struggle in Devon's eyes, the protective brother who had witnessed heartbreak before, the man who had judged Kane harshly in the past, but who, despite his reservations, could not ignore the sincerity radiating from Kane in that moment. And slowly, with careful words and patient demeanor, Kane managed to soften Devon's stance, planting the seeds of trust that, though fragile, were vital for the path ahead. And just as this intimate family negotiation seemed to gain traction, a message arrived, a harbinger of the chaos that so often defined their lives. A text from Jill Abbott, reminding Kane and Lily that Genoa City was never content to let personal happiness flourish unchallenged, that the whispers in the corridors of Newman Enterprises and Chancellor Winter's offices had already begun to swirl, that alliances were forming in shadows, and that every step they took forward would be scrutinized, judged, and potentially sabotaged. And Lily, absorbing this reality, felt both a thrill and a pang of anxiety, realizing that love in Genoa City was never free from the tangles of social, professional, and familial pressures, yet the thought of facing them with Kane at her side gave her courage, a quiet determination to fight not just for their relationship but for the promise of happiness that they both deserved. And as she looked at Kane, seeing the steadiness in his eyes, the quiet resolve that had carried him through years of personal and professional turmoil, she felt a surge of hope that perhaps this time, things could be different, that perhaps, against all odds, they could carve out a life defined not by the chaos around them but by the strength of their bond. And as the night deepened, they discussed their future in hushed, intimate tones, planning not just the wedding, but the approach they would take to navigate the treacherous waters of Genoa City, from handling family expectations, negotiating with friends who had their own agendas, to safeguarding their careers and personal reputation, all while keeping the flame of their rekindled love alive. And Kane, ever strategic yet deeply romantic, mapped out contingency plans for potential interferences, knowing that in a city where trust was rare and loyalty even rarer, being proactive was essential. And as they shared a quiet moment, reflecting on the twists of fate that had led them here, they both recognized the profound irony that it took near heartbreak, betrayal, and years of separation to truly appreciate the value of what they had, that the trials had strengthened rather than weakened their connection, and that the unexpected proposal, bold and courageous as it had been, was only the beginning of a journey that would require fortitude, patience, and unwavering devotion. And even as they embraced, feeling the weight of the ring on Lily's finger and the reality of their commitment settling around them like a protective cocoon, the distant hum of Genoa City reminded them that life would not pause, that drama was never far, and that every moment of joy would be punctuated by challenges designed to test the resilience of their union. Yet in that embrace, in the shared warmth of their presence, Kane and Lily found a quiet affirmation that no matter what obstacles lay ahead, from lingering ex-lovers to corporate rivalries, from family disapproval to public scrutiny, they would face it together, fortified by the love that had endured so many trials, strengthened by the knowledge that their hearts had finally found their way back to one another, and emboldened by the promise that this proposal was more than a symbolic gesture. It was a declaration that at last they were ready to confront life as partners, as equals, as two people who had weathered storms and emerged stronger, who had learned that love was not just about passion but about patience, forgiveness, and the courage to take risks even when the stakes were impossibly high. And as the night stretched on, they spoke of dreams long deferred, ambitions long postponed, and the life they now had the chance to build together. A life where trust would be nurtured, laughter would echo through their shared home, and love would be the guiding principle that no scheme, betrayal, or whispered secret could ever undermine. And as they finally settled into a tentative, hopeful rest, their minds teetering between anticipation and anxiety, they understood that the proposal was not the culmination of their story, but the first chapter of a renewed saga, one where every challenge would be faced together, every obstacle met with courage, and every moment of happiness savored fully, because in Genoa City, where nothing was ever simple, Kane and Lily had, against all odds, chosen each other once again, and that choice, radiant and defiant, promised that the future, though uncertain, was theirs to shape, theirs to cherish, and theirs to defend. And as sleep began to claim them, wrapped in each other's arms, the weight of past mistakes lightened by hope, they dreamed not just of a wedding but of a lifetime in which their love, tested but unbroken, would finally have the chance to flourish free from the shadows that had haunted them for so long. And in that shared dream, the city outside might rage, gossip, and scheme, but inside the walls of their fragile yet resolute sanctuary, Kane and Lily had found a moment of peace, a promise of tomorrow, and a love worth fighting for, fiercely, unconditionally, and forever.